one of the things that happens when my mental health spirals, um, I obsess. And in a sense, I'm aware of it. In another sense, I'm not aware of it. And eventually it just takes over and it becomes very distracting. So when I was having my last major breakdown, I couldn't focus. I couldn't focus. And it would get to the point of disassociation. So like I didn't know who I was, you know? And I mean, I knew who I was. Like, I could tell you my name, my address, and everything about my history, but I felt like I was in someone else's body. And it was so distracting. I couldn't focus. I mean, I was faking it through work and had no joy, and it was hard. And from what I understand, a psychiatric service dog will be able to sniff or detect when I am obsessing, which should be interesting, and act on that. And I would love to have I would have loved to have had as a kid some type of intervention when that happens. And don't get me wrong, like I've gotten better at managing it, but when it gets bad, it gets to a place where it's just not good. There's also my depression. Um, when it's at its worst, it's physically painful. I can't, I just can't function. And what's so weird is I hate it because I'm a hardworking guy. I think I am. I am very driven, motivated, all this stuff, confident. But when that depression takes over, it's not even like beyond sadness here. It's just this weight I carry around that yeah, I just can't get through it. I can fake it really well. Thank you, acting classes, for helping me. I can put on this exact smile when I'm depressed, and it's hard. And maybe the inclusion of a psychiatric service dog might help alleviate that, distract me. I'm not sure. But then there's anxiety. So it starts with this rabbit hole that I go down. And sometimes I go down slow and sometimes it just like I fall down a rabbit hole. And it starts, I think, with obsessing, I think. And I say that because it's like I get the obsessing, the anxiety, and the depression all at once. And I don't know which came first. So starts with the obsessing, at least that's what I think. And then it goes into anxiety because, the obsessing, I'm telling myself some kind of story that can be true or not true or whatever. And I go into anxiety. I feel it in my chest, and it's hard because sometimes my only way out of it is anger, or it turns into anger, and I act differently when I'm feeling this level of anxiety. I mean, sometimes I just seem very quiet or into myself, but I'm struggling, and I can't think straight. I end up making poor decisions, and I'm not blaming my mental illness for my behavior, because I believe that everyone ultimately needs to be responsible for their behavior. I can't just, you know, my anxiety takes over and I punch someone, and I can't just use that as an excuse. At the end of the day, I own it, right? But there are certain levels of intensity that it comes at that really, really influences behavior in ways that aren't good. Ultimately, I'm responsible, but it really influences behavior in ways that aren't good. And, so I start with this spiraling, and it just goes into this dark place where I'm not myself. When it happened in 2017, the last breakdown, I remember where I was, and the only way I can describe it physically is an elevator in a movie where somebody cuts the cable to an elevator and it just drops 30 stories down and slams on the ground. That's what I felt inside myself. I remember where I was standing in Queens on the street. And I knew at that point I wasn't going back. There's this point when I feel it, I feel myself go down this rabbit hole, and it literally hits a point where it's like, okay, we are in a bad spot. There's no self-talk, there's no breathing exercises, there's no praying, there's no nothing that's going to turn this around. I need professional help at that point. I need assistance. And it's at that point where I'm hoping a psychiatric service dog will be able to intervene in some way to help me get the help that I need quicker, or help bring me out of that low point. And it's interesting because I can still function momentarily as normal Mike, but whether it's hours or days, it just spirals into a different person. And I don't like to even talk about it, not because I don't want to talk about it, but because I don't want to go there in my head. Like, I know what that's like. I'll never forget that feeling of just being alive and being aware, but not knowing who I was. Like, I was in someone else's body, and this was going on for months. And one night, I guess it was in a Starbucks. I went to Starbucks, and I got a bottle of water because I wanted just water. I felt like I needed hydration. Only to realize hours later, I had just been sitting there at the table with the bottle of water, like just looking at the bottle of water. I mean, I was drinking it too, but something was wrong. And at that point, I messaged my therapist, and she said, go to the hospital. And I went to the hospital, and there was Jamaica Hospital in Queens. I went to the emergency room, and I told them what was happening, and they said, well, you need to go to the other emergency room. There's a psychiatric emergency room. And how grateful I am that there was a psychiatric emergency room that specialized in this thing. And I'll never forget, like, I got to the psychiatric emergency room, and they're taking my vitals and all those things they do to check you into the emergency room. I just remember these nurses were trying to just be optimistic and cheer me up, try to make me laugh in the most gentle way. And I knew at that moment, like, if I were in a normal state of mind, I would have been enjoying the conversation, laughing with them. I couldn't, I couldn't, I couldn't feel anything from it. It was tough, and that's when I was glad that they admitted me, and it was the first time in a while that I first night that I got a good night's sleep in months, because that's the other thing, is that the depression and the anxiety can affect sleep for me, and I end up not sleeping, and that's not good for anyone's mental health if you're not sleeping. So that becomes a thing. So it just becomes this giant snowball effect of symptoms and thought patterns. And so I'm grateful I have medication that I take every day. I've got certain medication if I do start to spiral, which helps to tranquilize me, I'll say, if need be. I actually asked my psychiatrist for a horse tranquilizer, and she said no. And so, but we gave me a one that's legal to use for humans. And so I have that with me. Um, but there are just moments where, even that doesn't matter. So having, you know, having every resource possible is important to me. So that's where the psychiatric service dog came in, especially because I travel so much. I'm constantly on the move, and travel is stressful for anybody. It's stressful for anybody, even myself. I'm pretty relaxed with travel, like missed flights, late flights, and who knows what else, jet lag. But you combine the basic stress of travel with psychiatric disabilities, and it's just not good. And there's just many many trips that I've taken for work that I don't ever want to think about again, because they were just a disaster, complete disaster. I remember one, man, I was in Michigan. I had to close a state conference as the keynote. And like the only way I got through this thing was I got to my hotel early. I put on my suit, and basically, I mean, this is like 6 hours before the presentation. I just was on the bed in my suit, lying there and shaking, just trying to hold it together. And I came down to the ballroom to do the presentation, and I don't even remember like what I said, but I think it was so emotional. Well, people just thought it was great because it was a mental health presentation, so it had emotion behind it. I don't know. I did not make any sense. It did not make any sense. And I mean, people clapped. Maybe they just had no standards or whatever. Or maybe it came out great. I don't know, but I mean, I can usually recall what I did in the presentation, and this one I remember just being in a dark place, and hoping there was a mental health professional in the audience who would see that and come talk to me after, but that didn't happen.